Welcome to Taking the Higher Road, a podcast by DriverReach in partnership with FreightWaves. I'm your host, Jeremy Reymer, founder of DriverReach, a modern software solution at the intersection of recruiting and compliance. With over 20 years in the trucking industry, both on the carrier side as well as the vendor side, I bring a wealth of expertise around all things recruiting, retention, and compliance. And in this show, I interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insight to the driver lifecycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges, from recruitment and retention to the realm of regulatory compliance. Your positive feedback keeps us motivated, so don't forget to rate and review Taking the Higher Road on your preferred platform. Now, this week, I'm thrilled to be joined by a great industry friend and fellow compliance nerd, Stacey Gibson, Personnel Operations Manager at TLC Companies. Great to finally have you on the show, Stacey.
Yes, thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, now, TLC Companies is the country's largest transportation professional employer organization, or PEO. And I know with almost a decade of experience in the transportation space and over 20 years in the safety and risk and HR space, you've got a ton of expertise and you're extremely passionate. So I'm excited to dive into your journey, your experiences in the industry. We can talk about the importance of mitigating risk through properly vetting and hiring drivers, ensuring compliant DQ files. I'd like to talk about your passion for women in trucking. I assume you'll be in Dallas for this year's Accelerate conference.
Absolutely.
And then last, I'd like to make sure we leave some room for a question from a listener during our deeper dive segment. It's a lot to unpack. Does that work for you?
Absolutely.
Sweet. Well, before we even dive in, I am curious. This is a custom, if you have any book recommendations for the audience, something that might have been influential or impactful to you.
Yeah. So actually currently reading one. It's called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Reading it with a couple of friends over at Sales Chatter Live. I do a plug for them and their podcast. So very interesting. A lot of reflection coming out of that book. Certainly having to reread some things over to digest it all, but I would definitely recommend anybody picking that book up and taking a look at that.
The Power of Now. Thank you for sharing that. I've been reading a lot of books also that are sort of reflective, and it's good for you, right? It's good for your soul. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Now, let's talk about your journey. What got you into the trucking industry? How did that evolve?
Sure. So prior to coming to TLC, certainly had touched on pieces in the trucking industry, working with companies that handled really some of the, I'll say the health side. So those physicals, right? The med card fit and physicals, the drug screening, and just overall health aspects, along with some management of some types of driver pools. But my deep dive happened once I started with TLC, kind of thrown into the deep end of the pool, so to say. So, but have just fallen in love with the industry, and to your point, have just become an absolute compliance nerd.
Well, that's what I love talking to you. Yeah, that's why I like talking to you, because I know we can geek out on some of this stuff, and it's just fun. And especially when people, like, we can help. Like, I know there's things that we can do to help. Like, there's things that maybe they don't know, or they just aren't have the right tools to. And it's so frustrating.
Exactly.
So for those in the audience that aren't familiar with a PEO, could you maybe explain what TLC Companies does for your customers?
Sure. Yep. So PEO, as you said earlier, it stands for Professional Employer Organization. So we come on as the administrative employer along with a company. For TLC, again, that's mostly motor carriers. That's the industry that we service specifically and have since 1985. So we assist with the driver screening and compliance, a lot of HR aspects, payroll taxes, benefits, all that back-end admin stuff that you need to do and you have to have, but nobody likes to do it. So a lot of times it kind of gets, pushed to the end of the priority list until something happens that it's that kind of, oh crap moment. So we're here to help avoid those moments.
Well, and I think there's probably a lot of benefits from economies of scale and expertise, right? This is exactly what you do. And the reality is a lot of trucking companies, they're probably really good at, maybe they have got relationships in buying trucks, or or they have some really good lanes and some good customers, but few of them are really good at everything. And some of those things, when it comes to compliance and, properly managing, hiring, qualifying drivers and those sorts of things, that's an area of expertise for you that you can probably mitigate a significant amount of risk for some of your customers, that them trying to do it on their own exists. So
yes, absolutely.
Well, while most companies have struggled, I'd say at least the past year or so with the freight recession, you've actually experienced growth. So maybe at TLC, can you share, how, or maybe even better yet, why that is?
Sure. I think just, what we've just spoken about, right? Companies are realizing, there's a lot to do, right? There's a lot you have to keep up with, a lot you have to manage. And all of that back end stuff, it's just as important as finding that freight, dispatching drivers, getting everything where it needs to go. But, when you're a small to mid-sized carrier, you don't necessarily have, the internal office headcount to handle it all and manage it all properly. You have everybody in the office is wearing multiple hats. Well, again, that becomes a problem because you can't prioritize everything, right? So I think companies are realizing that and understanding they do need help. And if they want to grow their business, that's what they're going to have to do. And we can do that really at a fraction of the cost of what it would cost them to hire, 5, 6, 7 more people in their office. We can do the work of that many people. I think a lot of them are realizing that. And I think, in most part, some of the specific areas we service within the trucking industry, just words getting out, right? Words getting out that, hey, we use these guys and they're awesome and you should too. So that's certainly been beneficial for us as well.
Well, and hopefully those of you who are watching this show, this might also spur some additional. Could you share, just for the audience sake, what's sort of the ideal client size, customer size, carrier size for you? Where you can really provide the most value?
Yeah. So, our client size goes from anywhere from 1 driver to 600 plus. But I think, where we are most beneficial is in that 30 to 60 head count is where we really can step in and really help those companies grow, again, by taking on all that administrative work and just being there as a resource for them to make sure they're compliant, not only in DOT, but, on the payroll side, and other issues as well. So,
well, given your deep involvement and passion for the industry, are there any innovative approaches or maybe some emerging trends that you foresee shaping the industry's future, particularly in terms of driver well-being or recruitment strategies?
Yeah, I think anybody and everybody in the industry knows that, driver health is not great overall, right? It's a tough industry to work in for these men and women, especially over-the-road drivers. You're not in a place where you can plan meals or prep meals, and your choices out there on the road are not the greatest, right? And so I think, a big part of retention, a lot of people, when they think of that, I feel like they think of, I'm having to, on recruiting and retention, I'm having to recruit because drivers are looking elsewhere. But a lot of drivers, we have to look at retention at what about the drivers that are exiting the industry because they're being forced to, because they can't get their med card, they can't pass that physical. I think the stat last that I saw was 5 to 10% of the driver population is lost every year because a driver cannot pass that physical. So it's, what are we doing as an industry to help? Are we just saying, oh man, that sucks, good luck, let us know, once you get everything worked out, are we actually coming to them with solutions and supporting those solutions and, and helping them along that way? There are several people out there. I know Dr. Mark Manera is out there, he's rallying around. Bob Perry, good buddy of mine, he's such a passion for driver's health. And then Hope Zamora, the Mother Trucker Yoga. These are folks that are out there that understand the industry. They understand that the solutions that need to be available, they're not traditional, right? They're not traditional to what you and I can go. You and I can say, oh yeah, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to the gym at 3:00. We can do that. The drivers can't do that. That's not an option for them. So we need to work with them to help them. And when you show a driver that you care about their health like that, it's just all the other good things fall into place, right? They're going to be able to stay drivers longer. They're going to stay with you longer and keep that retention. So,
yeah, I love it. And, you mentioned Mark Manero, you mentioned Bob Perry. Both have been guests on the show. I love them both as well. I've not had Mother Trucker's Yoga on the show, but I would love that. And I agree with you. Like, gravy is not a vegetable, right? We have to be so much more intentional when and as a driver, especially if you're gone all week long or longer, you have to be so intentional and prepare for the road to eat the things that you need to eat. And I'm a big proponent of the importance of what you eat, what you put into your body, and they just don't have that luxury without being super intentional. But they need help and they need support. And so, I think that's a really good point. Especially when I know I think I read something recently where the average age, of a driver, their death, what's the word I'm looking for? Longevity, basically, is like in the 60s. It's awful. That's just awful. That's just not supposed to be like that. So anyway, I really appreciate your passion there. You're also active in Women in Trucking as a member. How has your involvement influenced your approach to leadership and advocacy within the industry, being a member of Women in Trucking?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been a member going on, I think it's 4 years now, 4 or 5 years. We lost a year with COVID, so I lose track sometimes. But I've been a huge proponent and supporter of that organization. Ellen Voya did an amazing job creating this organization and building it. They do so much for women in trucking. And when we say that, what we want, and I say I am only a member. I'm not any type of representative for the organization, but what I've seen in the events that I've attended and webinars and any conversations I've had with Ellen is, it's not just about getting in a truck, right? There are a million components that go into trucking. And a million different roles that, women can come into trucking to be in this industry and make a difference in this industry. So I'm just trying to do my small part to help promote that and help encourage women to look at an industry, that they maybe would have never considered before. I didn't. If someone had asked me, 15 years ago, hey, would you be interested in working in trucking? I'd say, well, no, I never really thought about it. But, now that I've been in it, I can't imagine doing anything else or being in any other industry. And so I think, Women in Trucking does a phenomenal job of promoting that, promoting women within the industry and just educating men and women on what's out there and all the opportunity that's out there. So I'm excited to be a part of it.
Same here. I've been a member for a really long time, personally, and previous company and through to DriverReach. And I agree. I think it's really important. And, as you mentioned, you couldn't imagine doing something else. I would imagine that you would say, because I know you enough to know, and we have been in the industry long enough, that how important it is from a relationship standpoint. You build relationships that last a lifetime. Your network is really strong. The thought of going somewhere else is not even, why would I do that? But you didn't know that until you got into it. And once you did, you realized, wow, this is pretty awesome. And I know with women being such a small percent compared to men in the industry, growing, but still fractional, I do think it's important the more women you get. It's not just because because it's numbers to offset a shortage of drivers that you need. But I think it helps improve the image of the industry significantly the more rounded the industry is in terms of demographics. So from that perspective, I think that's another big deal. Now, from a technology standpoint, we talked about the importance of compliance, the importance of vetting drivers, and you're ultimately managing a lot of that for your customers. Is it TLC's sort of proprietary solution that you use? Is a lot of manual work or combination? How does that work?
Yes, we do have a proprietary solution that we utilize. But then obviously, we're partnered with a lot of companies within the industry as vendors to help us obtain reports and information and data so that, we can make sure that our clients are getting the best possible view of a driver and their history and activity and behavior so that they can make, the most educated decision, right, to make sure that they are hiring, what we hope to be, a safe driver and good employee and one that they're going to be able to retain, right? So yeah, there's a lot to it, as you well know, and so many moving parts. I think we're probably going to have a lot of puns during this next several minutes, but a lot of moving parts within that process. But it's so important, and I know I'll say I don't know of anyone in the industry who has not heard the term nuclear verdict yet. And if you have not, then I'd come out from under the rock, come join us, come join the class, because, it's something that is at the top of all of our minds always, right? When we're talking about qualifying drivers, nobody has a crystal ball, right? Anything can happen at any moment, regardless. But you can certainly, just by data and statistics, somewhat predict the future. And so, to try to help avoid these nuclear verdicts or being a part of one, that's really what you have to do. We can't be so lax anymore to just say, he's good enough, she's good enough, right? Even if we are just in one of those tight binds, it's like, I've got empty seats, I got to get them filled. I've got freight to move. I understand, right? I understand. And I tell our clients, I need your seats filled too, because that's how I get paid. So it behooves both of us to get your seats filled, but let's fill them with the right person so that once we do fill that seat, it's going to stay filled for a long time, that we're not actually coming back and having this conversation a month from now because you got one or two good runs out of that person, either before they just said, grass is greener over here, maybe they think, or God forbid something happens, right? So yeah, just so important to be diligent right now in how we're looking at that information.
Well, that statement, the grass is greener, I read something recently. The grass is greener where you water it. Mm-hmm. Right. And so when you invest your time and energy, and so that's where the grass is greener. So I like that quote as a comeback to anybody who said, this is the grass is greener.
Exactly.
You mentioned nuclear verdicts, and just to touch on that real quick, I know, as a former member of ATRI's Research Advisory Committee, I was part of at the time when they actually put together the report on nuclear verdicts and settlements. And it's great, chock full of really good data and slides and data points. And so one of the things that really stands out is that there are two reasons that, can lead to nuclear verdicts or settlements. And that's generally, it's either compliance. If it's a driver qualification file compliance issue, you're going to lose about 100% of the time. Right. So, and that's something that's in your control. Mm-hmm. And then the other is behavior. Driver behavior on the road, things like that can also lead to those sorts of settlements or verdicts. And my point is, while you certainly have limited control on the behavior, you can impact that, behavior to some extent through the hiring process and ongoing training, management, coaching process. But what you have 100% control over is the quality and the thoroughness and completeness of your driver qualification files. Yet that is such a wide open area where, as I see so many different companies, I'm like, it's right there. I mean, you can fix these things. You're exposed. So,
it's low hanging.
Very comparatively speaking. Yeah, absolutely. And I think better safety and compliance really starts with the driver qualification file. So, it's probably time to jump into the deeper dive question before I've got to let you go. But, this is a question that was submitted from a listener. The question is, with the economy's downturn, we're focusing more on retention versus recruiting. Do you have any suggestions for how we can best retain our best drivers? What do you think?
I have to go back and say, make the driver's health a part of your safety program, right? When you show an interest in the driver and their health and well-being, just, that's going to totally change the relationship, right? No different than, your friends and family. You're always asked, how are you doing? How are you feeling? If you know that they've been ill, you check in on them. How can I help? Do you need anything? That kind of constant communication and openness with drivers, I think, is huge. Again, they're doing a pretty isolated job, right? So they don't have somebody sitting next to them in an office, or for so many of us now who are working remote, we don't necessarily have that coworker right next to us, but we have Teams, we have Zoom, we have all these methods that we can quickly get in front of someone. But again, our drivers, they're driving. They can't be on a Zoom call
right
while they're driving. So, personally, I think that's huge. I think, the rewards that you're going to reap from that, you're going to see that ROI because you're going to get the retention, right? I mean, recruiting, what is it? I think the average cost to recruit is around $3,500 to $5,500 on average.
Yeah,
I mean,
at least,
think if you just took half of that money, half of that to retain a driver, to just put something in place, or whenever they're in a terminal, have a, bag of healthy snacks or something, some bottled water, things like that they can do. Have a buddy system, have someone in the office that can be that buddy system, or if someone in the office is kind of going through their own health journey that's similar to a driver, right? Have that kind of buddy system set up in place so they can hold each other accountable, right? Drivers love competition. I think they're very competitive. So, anytime you can have some type of competition, obviously where there's some rewards in play, I think are always great solutions to help with that.
Some really good suggestions, and going back to the health and wellness, invest in your people is, I think, kind of the point that you're getting at there. Thank you so much for joining us, Stacey. I really appreciate your time. Certainly appreciate the relationship that we have and your passion for the industry. It means a lot.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much.
And thanks for joining me for another episode of Taking the High Road, for spreading the word to your industry peers. We really appreciate it. Remember, you could submit any question or comments, including those which may appear on upcoming deeper dive segments, at podcast@driverreach.com. And don't forget to rate and review Taking the Higher Road, whatever platform you use to listen. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.